the reason I bring this up is because I see a very similar pattern forming on Bitcoin, maybe even a better pattern in the higher term time frame. So if you are sidelined or you are looking for some sort of short trade setup on Bitcoin, if you haven't already, we'll be going over a good setup and why I think there's a very good short trade setup coming. Hello and welcome back to the Storm Trading Channel. For those of you guys who have been following my channel for a long time, you probably realized that I hadn't posted any sort of Bitcoin or high-term time frame analysis update in a few months now. Obviously, my last couple calls were kind of the higher-term time frame, bottom of Bitcoin around 50K. And then again, I give you guys a good compound setup about a month after that. But since then, I haven't really taken any massive swing trades on Bitcoin. And I'm excited today to come back to you guys with a great higher term time frame setup, very similar to the call I made around 50K on Bitcoin, but kind of reversed. I'm now kind of a short-term bear on Bitcoin. And I do think that Bitcoin and a lot of these other higher cap cryptocurrency coins are due for somewhat of a short to medium term time frame correction. And obviously I'm going to be going over that a lot more in depth as we get into the video. But I do want to remind you guys before we get started, I'm not a financial advisor. This is not financial advice. So just make sure you guys do your own research before making any trades. But without further ado, let's get into the video. All right, so we are going to, of course, start by checking the trusty Crypto Fear and Greed Index just to give us an idea of what the general market sentiment is in the market. And this is actually the third or fourth straight week where we are in the greed section of the Fear and Greed Index. I believe 2 or 3 straight weeks we were actually in the extreme greed. It got almost to 90 on the Fear and Greed Index at one point, when we were kind of reaching that high right above or right below 100K. And as you guys know, counter trading market sentiment is one of my biggest confluences. So when I see an overly fearful market, that's when I look to long. Just like when I longed around 50K, when every crypto influencer and their mom were calling for 30K, 35, 40K Bitcoin. That was when I was wanting to look for a really juicy short. And so when we got that technical analysis to line up with that, counter trading sentiment, that's when I took that long. And so on the flip side of that now, when I see an overly greedy market for an extended amount of time, I'm going to look to short the market, right? So now all that's left is to look for the technical analysis to line up and give me that trade entry. And the next thing we would typically look at is the liquidation heat map. Of course, this is the 1 day where the CoinGlass Bitcoin liquidation map is down, so it's not showing. But I did make a tweet from about a week ago explaining more in depth my macro analysis thesis and why I believe we were entering somewhat of a local top on Bitcoin for a lot of the same reasons I just went over, right? You had the extreme greed on the Bitcoin index for the second or third straight week. This was actually what the liquidation heat map looked about a week ago. It's probably even worse, where you can see all the liquidity is kind of resting to the downside. We've tapped all that liquidity that we had formed over the course of 6 to 7 months. We'd finally tapped that, and so now we're forming a lot of liquidity to the downside, right? And then the last piece is the technical analysis, which I will get into here now. So for context, guys, I actually am in a short trade already from this macro analysis thesis that I had posted November 20th. At the time of posting that thesis, I was very clear that even though I was macro bearish in the short to medium term and looking for a short trade, I wasn't actually going to take a short trade until I got that technical setup or some sort of technical confluence to give me an actual trade with an invalidation and take profits. And so a couple days ago, I was given that. For me, it was the break of this trend line leading up to 100K, and then the back test, which gave me my entry. I posted that on my X. This is actually an active position that I'm still currently in. I've not taken any profit. I've not been stopped out. So this is an actual active trade that I'm currently in. But the reason I bring this up is because I see a very similar pattern forming on Bitcoin, maybe even a better pattern in the higher term time frame. So if you are sidelined or you are looking for some sort of short trade setup on Bitcoin, if you haven't already, we'll be going over a good setup and why I think there's a very good short trade setup coming. So first and foremost, let's go over the context of Bitcoin. We'll start with the obvious, which is this high term time frame channel that we had been trading off of for many months, right? This was about an 8-month channel. I'd taken 6 or 7 trades off the top and bottom of this channel, as well as the midpoints, with almost a perfect hit rate. I did lose a short trade before we broke out. So took a short trade up here, which ended up getting stopped out, and I flipped that into a long trade of the break and back test of the channel, which gave me a really juicy long. And so we look at this downward sloping channel, and one thing I emphasized is that not only is this a channel, but it's actually a bull flag pattern, right? So a bull flag pattern is an impulse to a downward sloping channel, and that would give you context that you would most likely break to the upside. So that was part of the reason why I was also so bullish on Bitcoin, was we were forming this high term time frame bull flag. And so before we broke out, one thing I talked about was the bull flag targets, right? Because when you form a bull flag, not only does it give you, confluence or reason to think that we are going to the upside, but it also gives you a target. And that textbook target would be a 1-to-1 extension. So you look at the pole, right? This first impulse move up, you'll take that distance from the start to the top of the pole, which would be from here to here, right? And you take that distance and you go to the breakout, right, where the breakout occurred, which would be right here, and you're looking for a 1-to-1 extension of where price broke out of the channel and to where price would end up potentially. And so that gives us a zone around 100K. Obviously, the exact number is about 101K. But when we're doing trading these high term time frame setups, you're really looking at it like a zone. So 100 to 101K, right? This is a big zone. This is kind of that target for the breakout of this bull flag pattern that we'd been trading for many months. So that gives you one really big level of confluence. The next big level is, of course, the psychological level at 100K. When you're trading all-time highs, it's very difficult, right? Because as a technical trader, what you're really doing is you're using data in the form of these candles, right? And what candlesticks are just data of price movement, right? So you're using this data in the terms of candlesticks and price movement to give you different setups and determine the direction based on previous price data. And so when you're at all-time highs and there is no previous price data, there are very few tools that will actually give you clean setups to take. But the one and probably the biggest, I would say, are psychological numbers. And there's no bigger psychological number than 100K, right? That is a very large psychological number. It's one that a lot of people are kind of licking their lips and have limit orders set at 100K Bitcoin, and so you would expect some sort of reaction at that psychological 100K level. And so that lines up almost perfectly with our bull flag pattern breakout. And then lastly, you're also getting this pennant forming on the high term time frame, which to me just shows kind of a slowing down of this impulse move up, right? So you had this really big impulse move up, and you're now kind of getting this condensed, choppy price action in the form of a symmetrical triangle or a pennant some would call it. The reason people would call it a pennant is because you did get an impulsive move into this pattern. Textbook would tell you that this is a continuation pattern, kind of like a bull flag, but for symmetrical triangles, it's more of a 50-50. I'm more so looking for the breakout and back test to confirm the direction that the trend will go after the breakout of the symmetrical triangle. And because there's so much confluence right at 100K, which is where we kind of bumped up into, I would say I'm much more strongly leaning towards a breakout to the downside, right? And so that would kind of lead me into what a potential setup would be on Bitcoin with the previous information we just went over. Also, very quickly, another piece of confluence that I did forget to mention was the trend line when you connect both the tops from last cycle. So if we zoom out here, we'll put it on the weekly chart. It's a little bit cleaner. If you zoom out here and you look at the Bitcoin chart on the high-term time frame where you include last cycle's price action as well, and you draw a trend line connecting both the tops from last cycle, we are kind of perfectly bumping up into that trend line touch. So just another bit of confluence when you line everything up. It gives us this really thick zone between 100 to 102K where we have a ton of confluence. And then obviously, like I said, you line that up with the general market sentiment and the liquidations, and that's what's going to give me that really strong short bias. So let's go back down to regular mode, take off this trend line. So now I'm going to talk about the setup, right? So we've talked about the confluence and the macro thesis as to why I would be looking for a short here. Now, where can we get a short trade setup? Because one of the most valuable pieces of information that I got from my original mentor was you never catch a falling knife, right? And that goes for both directions. So generally what that means is like when the market is falling or rising at an extremely impulsive rate, you never want to time that perfect top or that perfect bottom. You want to wait for some sort of a reaction that's going to give you that confluence to, trade that reversal, right? You never want to just perfectly time it. So we are, like I said, forming this symmetrical triangle on the 4-hour chart. And so a really easy setup that I would give you guys that I mentioned earlier is this break and back test of this triangle. So we are coming to kind of the apex, the last 20% of this triangle. We would expect a breakout in either direction here very soon. I would say in the next day or two probably. And I've already explained why I'm leaning towards a break to the downside. So what you would want is probably something like this, where we get a breakout and a move down, still have not shorted, and then we get this back test after the confirmed break. And this is where you'd want to enter that short trade, right? On this back test of the triangle. Once we've confirmed a breakout with a lot of volume, maybe we've spent a day or two or some time out here to confirm that breakout. You're looking for some sort of pump back into this symmetrical triangle, and this would give you that short where you would expect further move to the downside. So that trade would look something like this, right? And I would put the stop loss at the top of this triangle. Would be kind of the textbook answer. I like to give myself a lot more cushion than most people. I wouldn't be super aggressive with his entry and try to put it at the top of a local wick. I would just put it up at the top of this triangle, and then you'd be targeting, I would say your bigger take profit level is probably somewhere around 74K, like that previous high level. But I would also, just like my last trade setup that I showed you guys when I took the trade, I do have a take profit 1 at the bottom of this symmetrical triangle, somewhere around that 85K zone, where I will take a little bit of profit and then move my stop loss up to entry just to protect my position. So that's kind of the trade setup that I would be looking for in the next couple of days. Obviously, like I said, if you haven't taken a short yet, this is still probably not the time to take a short. I would wait for some sort of confirmation as we form this symmetrical triangle, some sort of breakout and confirmation back test for that entry. But that is the video this week. We will see how it plays out in the coming weeks. I appreciate you guys for tuning in and coming back to my channel, and I will see you guys in the next video.